I thought this was the happiest day of my life until a secret shattered everything in just one moment. My name is Lauren Bennett, and this is the part of my story I never thought I'd tell. I found out I was pregnant the same day my husband's family came over to celebrate his big promotion. While balloons were floating in the hallway and appetizers were still crisping in the oven, I stood in the upstairs bathroom staring at two pink lines that felt like they belonged in a fairy tale. Except it wasn't fiction. Not this time. Not after 3 years of silent hoping, after holding my breath every month, after watching one negative test after another. There they were. 2 lines, 2 promises, a life. I sat on the edge of the tub, my hands trembling, pressing the plastic stick against my chest like it might hear my heartbeat and calm down with me. I whispered, "You're real." And I meant it not just to the baby, but to myself. Downstairs, laughter floated up through the vents. I heard my husband's voice. Zach, the man I thought I knew better than anyone. I imagined telling him. I pictured his face lighting up, spinning me around like they do in those movie moments, shouting, "We're gonna be parents." I imagined his hands on my belly, already brainstorming baby names like he used to when we were young and naive, and believed timing was just another detail. But I wanted to wait. Just a few hours. I wanted to tell him after the guests left. I wanted it to be just us. I wanted it to be special. So I tucked the test deep into the pocket of my cardigan, wiped my face, and headed down the stairs, heart thudding with excitement. I passed the mirror in the hallway and barely recognized myself, eyes gleaming, lips trembling in a half smile. This was going to be our moment. Finally, the living room was buzzing with life. People clinked glasses, Zach's mother complimented the wine, and his coworkers were chatting around the charcuterie board like they'd known each other for years. I smiled. I played hostess. I poured drinks and complimented outfits. All the while, I gently touched my stomach every few minutes, like I was already reassuring the tiny life inside that they were safe, loved, wanted. Zach was magnetic that night, charming, radiant, full of stories and gestures. He looked at me with that crooked smile that used to melt me, and for a moment I forgot about the worry. The waiting, the fear that it could all disappear. That was my mistake. And if you've ever been in that place on the edge of a life you think is finally coming together, leave a like and stay with me. This story doesn't go where I hoped it would, but maybe that's why it matters. Because sometimes the deepest betrayals come wrapped in celebration, and the person you trust the most is already halfway out the door. I moved through that evening like a woman in a dream, the kind of dream where everything looks beautiful on the outside, but your gut knows something's off, even if your mind hasn't caught up yet. Zach's parents, Bill and Marianne, brought a bottle of vintage red and a bouquet of sunflowers, his mom's favorite. His sister Ashley showed up 20 minutes late, but made it up with her oversized laugh and a tray of store-bought cannoli she pretended to bake. The whole house buzzed with noise and energy, but all I could hear under it was the quiet hum of soon. Soon I'd tell Zach. Soon I'd watch his world shift with mine. He caught me looking at him across the room and winked. That little wink, so familiar, so casual, made my throat tighten. It used to be our signal for let's sneak away. Now it felt like a glitch in a program I didn't realize had already been rewritten. Dinner was loud, filled with too much clinking silverware and layered conversations. Zach retold his favorite story from his Chicago conference, the one where a hotel receptionist handed him keys to the wrong room, and he walked in on a businessman shaving his chest. Everyone laughed, and I did too. But mine was the quietest laugh at the table. Marianne leaned over and whispered, "Lauren, you really outdid yourself tonight. This place feels like a magazine spread." I smiled. Just wanted to make it special, because I did. I always did. I'd spent the entire day prepping not just for this dinner, but for the moment. The one where I'd take Zach aside and show him the test and say, "You're going to be a dad," and everything would change in the right way. But somewhere between the garlic mashed potatoes and the tiramisu, I realized I hadn't seen Zach in a while. It was Ashley who noticed first. "Where's Zach?" she asked, stabbing her dessert with the kind of dramatic flair only siblings can pull off. I glanced toward the hallway. "He might be taking a call," I offered. "Probably work, or hiding in the study." Ashley shrugged. "He still keeps those blueprints stacked like towers in there, right?" I nodded, but something inside me shifted. A faint tremor. Like a thread had been tugged, and I wasn't sure what would unravel yet. I excused myself to check on him. "Just going to see if he needs anything," I said, brushing invisible crumbs from my dress. The hallway was dim and quiet, a contrast to the laughter echoing behind me. I passed the guest room, paused near the linen closet, then reached his office door. It was slightly ajar, golden lamplight spilling out in a narrow triangle across the hardwood floor. I reached to knock, and then I heard him speak, a voice low and intimate. Not the voice he used with me, not the one that made promises. It was too soft, too sure, and it wasn't meant for me. "I know, I hate it too," he said. A chuckle, intimate, familiar. "But what do you want me to do? The house is full of people." I froze. And before I go further, if you've ever had a moment where your world tilted sideways without warning, where the ground shifted beneath your feet in an instant, drop a comment and share it. Sometimes it's in those moments that we finally see what's been in front of us all along. Because what I heard next shattered everything. "I can't just walk out," Zach continued, his voice just a shade above a whisper. "It's her husband's big promotion, remember? That would look bad, even for me." There was a soft laugh. Not his, a woman's. Light, flirtatious, like she'd known him longer than I had. I stopped breathing. "No," he said, "of course she doesn't know. Lauren believes everything I say, like clockwork." Something inside me snapped. I wasn't thinking anymore. I wasn't calculating what to do or how to confront him. I was simply absorbing word by word the truth I hadn't wanted to see. The tone of his voice, the comfort in it, the complete lack of fear, it all told me one thing. This wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern, a plan. "I'll tell her soon," he added. "A few more weeks, let the party dust settle. Then I'll say we just drifted apart. That it's no one's fault." The usual soft landing garbage. My hand was still hovering near the doorknob, but I couldn't feel it. I couldn't feel my fingers. I couldn't feel my legs. Only the burn in my chest. "She still thinks we're going to have a baby." He laughed, bitter and cruel. "Poor thing's probably planning names." It was like hearing someone talk about a stranger. Not a wife, not a woman he shared a bed with. Not the person who just found out she was pregnant that morning with his child. He kept talking, but I'd stopped listening. I backed away from the door like it might explode. My feet carried me down the hallway like I wasn't in control anymore. I passed the guest room, the linen closet, the bathroom. Everything blurry now. I made it to our bedroom before my knees gave out. The carpet met my cheek. The room spun. My stomach turned to stone. In my cardigan pocket, the pregnancy test pressed into my thigh like a cruel joke. I pulled it out, held it in the light. 2 pink lines. I thought I'd show this to him over wine, maybe, with a tiny pair of booties in hand, and we'd cry on the kitchen floor like a cliché. Instead, I held it like a weapon, like evidence. My body shook, not from fear, but from something deeper, a betrayal so profound it made breathing feel like betrayal too. Because every inhale reminded me that he had touched me that morning, kissed me, smiled at me, all while knowing he was planning to leave. "She's sweet," he'd said, "but she's not you." That sentence clanged in my skull louder than the rest, because for all his cruelty, that was the clearest truth he'd ever told. I wasn't her. I was real. I was whole. And he was going to lose me. I curled up on the floor and let the tears come. Not silent, dainty tears. They were the kind that sounded like thunder if anyone had been listening, but no one was. Back in the living room, the cake was being cut. The guests were laughing. And my husband was probably toasting his career with the woman he'd already chosen over me. I splashed water on my face and stared into the mirror above the sink. My cheeks were blotchy, my eyes were swollen, but my reflection, She didn't look broken. She looked awake. For the first time in 3 years, I really saw myself. Not as Zach's wife, not as someone clinging to a perfect life built on his half-truths and bedtime excuses, but as a woman who had just uncovered a truth so raw, so unforgivable, that there was no going back. And yet I smiled. Just enough to pass. I slipped the test into the cabinet under the sink, away from view, away from him. Then I fixed my makeup, tied my hair back, and walked out of the bedroom. Down the hall I could hear Zach laughing again. The sound of clinking glasses followed a knife tapping a champagne flute, someone giving a toast. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and re-entered the party. Zach stood beside the bar, his hand resting on the back of his best friend's chair. He looked at me like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just spoken the words that would end us. As I walked past, he brushed my arm and whispered, "You good?" I nodded. I lied. Because telling the truth, the whole messy, soul-crushing truth in that moment would have been too easy. And he didn't deserve that kind of honesty from me. Not anymore. That night, after the guests left and the last wine glass had been rinsed and stacked, I watched Zach sink into the couch like a man completely satisfied with the evening. He unbuttoned his shirt, loosened his tie, and said, "Come sit. You've been running around all night." I sat beside him, legs still shaky, fingers clenched in my lap. He nudged my shoulder playfully. "Okay. What's the big news you've been teasing me with all day?" I looked at him. Really looked. His smile, so familiar, felt like a mask now. A mask I used to love. One I thought protected us both. My hand instinctively touched the pocket where the test had been earlier. Empty now. Just like us. "I'll tell you tomorrow," I said softly. "I'm exhausted." He frowned, then shrugged. "All right, I'll hold on to the suspense." And he walked away, humming to himself like nothing had shifted, like the weight of my silence meant safety. But it didn't. It meant a storm was coming. And if you're still with me, if you've ever pretended to be okay, just to make it through a moment, I want you to do one small thing right now. Leave a comment with just one word, "awake." Because sometimes, the moment you realize the truth is the moment you begin to rise. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay beside him, eyes open, tracing every red flag that suddenly had a name. The perfume that lingered. The sudden work trips. The way he never left his phone on the counter anymore. The shirt with the lipstick stain he swore was from his sister. It wasn't denial, it was devotion. And I was done with it. Tomorrow I would start over. But tonight I would let the silence settle between us, cold, final, and deserved. The next morning I woke up before the sun. The light hadn't shifted yet. The shadows in our bedroom still looked like night. And beside me, Zach was sleeping soundly, as if nothing had changed. As if the man who had promised me forever wasn't plotting his exit behind closed doors. I slipped out of bed quietly and padded into the kitchen. I didn't know what I was doing exactly, only that I needed to move. My hands found the sponge and scrubbed the counters. I organized the spice rack alphabetically. I cleaned the inside of the microwave twice. It wasn't about cleanliness. It was about control. Because the night before had unraveled every piece of certainty I thought I had. And this wiping, sorting, scrubbing was the only thing I could still manage without falling apart. Zach came into the kitchen around 7:30 a.m., dressed in gray joggers and earbuds already in place. "Going for a run," he said, grabbing his water bottle. "Back in an hour." I didn't answer. I just nodded like always. But the moment the door clicked shut behind him, I moved. Straight to his phone. I knew the code, our wedding anniversary. The irony stung worse than the betrayal. The screen unlocked in seconds, and there it was. A contact with no name, just a number. A string of messages. "I missed you all night. I hate pretending. When can we be done with this?" She won't see it coming. She still thinks we're solid. Attached were photos. One of them sitting together at a candlelit table I didn't recognize. Another, the one that made my stomach twist, was taken on our back porch. My back porch. I could see the wind chimes I hung last summer. That was the final nail. I barely made it to the bathroom before the nausea hit. This wasn't morning sickness. This was betrayal curdled into physical pain. I collapsed onto the cold tile floor, arms wrapped around my knees, tears choking my throat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to destroy something. I wanted to forget every single moment I had once called love. But I didn't, because no one else knew. To everyone else, I was still the lucky wife, the woman who had it all. I wiped my face. I stood up. And I grabbed my phone. I didn't want to tell anyone, not yet, but I couldn't hold it alone either. I texted Rachel. "Can we meet today? It's important." She replied instantly, "Of course. Same place." And that's when the plan started forming. Not revenge, not rage, but resolution. I wasn't going to break down in front of him. I was going to break free. At 11:00 a.m. sharp, I walked into the little cafe tucked between the dry cleaner and the florist on Maple Avenue. The place still smelled like Saturday mornings and cinnamon, like it hadn't changed, even though I had. Rachel was already there, sitting in our old booth by the window, a tea waiting across from her, untouched but steaming. She looked up as I approached, and I knew immediately she could see it in my face. The tightness, the red beneath my eyes. The weight I was trying and failing to carry alone. "Lauren," she said softly, standing halfway. "Hey." I didn't even pretend. I shook my head, and the words tumbled out before I could rehearse or soften them. "I think Zach's cheating on me." No, I know he is. I heard him during the party, in his office, on the phone with her. And this morning, I went through his phone. There are pictures, messages, her. I paused, sucking in a breath that felt jagged. "And I'm pregnant." Rachel froze. Her face changed in slow motion from shock to anger to something like heartbreak on my behalf. "Oh my God," she whispered, reaching across the table. "Lauren." I nodded, swallowing the tears clawing up my throat. I was going to tell him that night. I was planning this whole moment, something sweet, something just for us. And he was in the next room planning his exit. I told her everything. About the messages, about the photo on the porch, about how I'd sat at the dinner table smiling while he plotted how to spin our divorce like some casual breakup. I told her how I hadn't cried at the party, how I'd laid in bed beside him that night, feeling like a stranger was breathing next to me, how I still hadn't told him I was pregnant, how I wasn't even sure I wanted to. Rachel didn't interrupt. She just held my hand and let the silence between us speak where words couldn't. Finally, she said, "You don't have to figure this all out today, but whatever you do next, you don't have to do it alone." That was when I cracked just a little, because for so long I had done everything alone. I'd planned the meals, decorated the holidays, arranged the birthdays. I'd carried the emotional weight of us. And now here she was, offering to hold part of that weight. No conditions, no explanations required. "I don't even know where to start," I whispered. "You start," she said, "by knowing this isn't your fault. He chose to betray you. He built this mess. All you have to do is decide what comes next." I leaned back, staring out the window, watching a family cross the street, a dad hoisting a toddler in his arms while the mom laughed behind them. For a second, I felt like I was staring into someone else's life. A version of mine that might have been. One that was already gone. And still, something inside me stirred. A flicker. Not rage. Not despair. Strength. That afternoon, I went home with a strange calm buzzing in my chest. Not peace, not yet, but readiness. I didn't cry again. I didn't pace. I didn't rip photos off the walls like some TV drama cliché. Instead, I started cooking. Not because I wanted to feed Zach. Not because I wanted to create another perfect night. I needed a stage. Something about setting the table, folding the napkins, and basting the roast garlic chicken gave me the illusion of control. I opened the bottle of Merlot he liked, lit the good candles, put on the playlist we used on our anniversary trip to Seattle. Then I slipped into a dress I hadn't worn in years, the one he once said made me look like his favorite version of me. I looked into the mirror one last time before he came home. My makeup was soft, my posture steady. And behind my eyes, something fierce waited. At 6:03 p.m., the door opened. Zach stepped inside, grinning. "Smells amazing in here." I smiled. I thought we could have a nice dinner. Just us. He kissed my cheek and wandered into the dining room. Wow, he said. What's the occasion? No occasion, I said, brushing imaginary lint from the tablecloth. Just us. We ate mostly in silence. He talked about work, some client who wouldn't approve budget changes, a coworker who didn't reply fast enough to emails. I nodded, gave the right hums and chuckles in the right places. I watched him, the way he gestured, the way he held his fork. It was all so familiar and suddenly so foreign. After dessert, he reached for his wine glass. Zach, I said quietly. He froze, just slightly, then placed the glass back down. Yeah, we need to talk. There, it was the shift. His jaw tightened. His hand curled slightly around the base of the glass. What's going on? He asked. I stood, walked slowly to the other side of the table, sat beside him on the couch. I wanted to see his eyes when the mask cracked. I know, I said. His brow furrowed. Know what? I know about Madison. The silence that followed felt like it inhaled the whole room. He blinked once, then again. What are you talking about? I heard the call. During the party. I read the texts. I saw the pictures. You can stop pretending now. He stared at me, 1,000 micro-expressions flashing across his face. Then, nothing. How long have you known? He finally asked. Since your mother's party, I said. Happy anniversary. He rubbed his face with both hands and looked down. I didn't want it to happen this way. But you did want it to happen, I cut in. Yes, he whispered. Do you love her? I asked. He hesitated, then nodded. And I didn't break. Not this time. If you're listening right now and you've ever sat across from someone you trusted only to realize they'd already left you emotionally long ago, share that moment in the comments below. Sometimes the act of being seen starts by simply being heard. Because that night I wasn't just confronting Zach. I was confronting the version of myself that had stayed too long, and I wasn't her anymore. Zach leaned back on the couch, rubbing his temples like this conversation was an inconvenience, not a reckoning. Not the unraveling of years of trust and shared dreams. I never meant to hurt you, he said finally, voice low. I gave a small, bitter laugh. That line's older than our marriage. He looked up at me. I was going to tell you. I didn't know how. You didn't want to hurt me, I echoed. You wanted to leave me gently, like setting down a glass before dropping it anyway. Zach didn't argue. Maybe because he couldn't. Or maybe because even he knew there was no salvaging what came next. I took a breath and said the words I'd rehearsed in my head for hours. I'm pregnant. His head snapped toward me so fast I thought he might get whiplash. What? I held his gaze. I found out the morning of the party. Before the cake. Before the toast. Before I heard you talking to her. He stood pacing now, muttering under his breath. Are you serious? I nodded. 6 weeks. He stopped pacing and looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time in weeks. Oh my God. This changes everything. No, I said, standing slowly. It doesn't. Zach blinked. What do you mean? I'm keeping the baby, I said calmly. And I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. His mouth opened, then closed. No arguments, no apologies, just a stunned silence that hung between us like smoke. I gave you 5 years, I said, my voice still steady. I would have given you 10. But you gave yourself to someone else. I didn't think it would go this far, he said softly. Well, I said it did. And then something inside me shifted. Not broke, not crumbled. Shifted. Like tectonic plates adjusting beneath the surface, making room for something new. Zach didn't pack much that night. A duffel bag, a few shirts, his laptop. He said he'd be back for the rest when things were less tense. I didn't stop him, didn't scream, didn't cry. I just stood by the front door and watched the man I had once trusted more than anyone walk away like a stranger. He didn't look back, and I didn't need him to, because the silence that followed, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The house felt different the moment he left. It wasn't the missing shoes by the door or the space in the closet where his jackets used to hang. It was in the air, like something heavy had been lifted. Not grief. Not yet. But gravity. The kind of pull that had kept me grounded in a version of my life I didn't recognize anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold in my hands. I stared at the floor tiles, counting them, memorizing their cracks, anything to keep from thinking about how much I had just lost or maybe finally released. At 8:00 a.m. sharp, I walked into the law office of Michael Harrow, a divorce attorney Rachel had once recommended just in case, back when her cousin had gone through something eerily similar. I never thought I'd use his name. Yet here I was. Michael's office smelled like leather and quiet strength. He gestured to the chair opposite him and said softly, "Tell me everything." And I did. I told him about the affair, the texts, the photos. I told him about the pregnancy. I told him I didn't want a war, but I wasn't going to walk away like some forgotten draft in someone else's story. He listened, took notes, nodded, then leaned back and said, "You're in a very strong position, Lauren. You have proof. You're carrying his child. The law is on your side." That was the first time I felt it, a flicker of control. A crack of light beneath the door I thought had closed. After the meeting, I went straight to the clinic. Confirmed what I already knew: 6 weeks pregnant, healthy. The nurse handed me prenatal vitamins and a pamphlet called "Your First Trimester: What to Expect." I held it like it was something sacred, not just a guide, but a declaration. This was real. This was mine. When she asked if the father knew, I said yes, then added, "He's my soon-to-be ex-husband." She blinked. "Do you have support?" I smiled. "I do now." Later that afternoon, I walked into my office at work and sat across from my boss, Linda Carlson. She looked up from her spreadsheet and I said, "Not rehearsed, not polished, but true. I'm going through a divorce. And I'm pregnant." Linda didn't blink. She just nodded slowly and said, "We'll work with whatever you need." Her kindness almost broke me, not because it was dramatic, but because it was simple, solid, steady, something I could lean on without explanation. If you're still here with me and you've ever had to rebuild from ground zero, leave a comment and tell me, what was your turning point? That moment you realized you could begin again, even if the pieces didn't fit the way they used to. Sometimes, the smallest acts of grace remind us we're still worth saving. Because on that day, I didn't just choose to survive, I chose to start over. Days blurred into weeks after Zach left, but the silence in the house was anything but empty. It was filled with possibilities, terrifying, yes, but alive with the chance to rewrite everything. I wandered through the rooms, slowly touching the walls as if they were strangers. The guest room, which we had once planned to turn into a nursery, now stood bare. I traced my fingers along the windowsill, imagining what it might become: a quiet sanctuary just for me and the baby. That night, as I sat on the couch, I FaceTimed my parents. Their faces lit up with shock and joy when I told them I was pregnant. My mom wiped a tear away. "A baby. You're going to be a mother," she whispered. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "On my own." "You won't be alone," she promised. "You have us." Their support was a balm to my bruised heart. For the first time, I felt anchored. 3 weeks later, I carefully wrapped a framed photo of Zach and me taken on a windy cliffside trip years ago, the one where we pretended we were invincible. I didn't throw it away. Not yet. But I tucked it away, a relic of an old life. Each day I found new rhythms. I worked. I cooked. I went to doctor appointments. I started a journal not filled with flowery thoughts, but with notes about symptoms, cravings, and baby names. "You're the reason I get up when I don't want to," I wrote one night. My body began to change. First subtly, a tighter waistline, a deeper hunger, then profoundly. A fatigue no cup of coffee could fix. But inside me, I was rebuilding. Not just from Zach's betrayal, but from years of shrinking myself to fit someone else's expectations. Now I was unfolding. Rachel helped me clear out Zach's things. We packed up his college sweatshirt, the old razors, the books we'd bought together. "Want to burn this?" she joked, holding up a faded sweatshirt. I laughed. "No, let's donate it. Let someone else warm up to what I've outgrown. When the house was finally quiet, lighter, and somehow bigger, I lit a candle and curled up with a bowl of soup and a baby book Rachel gave me. The first page read, "You are stronger than you think." For once I believed it. If you've ever had to clear out the past to make room for your future, I want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments because healing is a journey we don't have to take alone. Because I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was ready to live. Time passed, and Zach's absence became clearer with each day. He only called twice. Once he texted, "We need to talk. I miss you." The next time he showed up at the door drenched from a sudden afternoon downpour. He said, "I just want to talk." I looked him straight in the eyes, calm but firm. "You don't want that. You just want to feel better about yourself." He sighed. "I made a mistake." I cut him off. "You made your choice." He looked around as if searching for a piece of the life we once shared, but that person no longer existed. I didn't yell. I didn't throw him out like a scene from a movie. I just closed the door and stood there watching the man I once loved walk away without looking back. I didn't cry, because I wasn't that girl anymore. The next day, I calmly folded the laundry I'd washed, put on some soft music, and started making a shopping list for the baby on the way. I knew I still had a lot of pain and complexity to work through, but I also knew I was moving forward. One Sunday morning, I signed up for a prenatal class at the community center. I was the first to arrive. A woman named April sat beside me, smiling warmly. "It's my first time too," she said. We laughed together, and for the first time I felt strength in shared experience. In the weeks that followed, I rewrote my stories of strength, of single motherhood, of women refusing to be defined by their circumstances. One piece got published in a small magazine, then another, and then many more. Each line I wrote kindled a small flame inside me, a flame that couldn't be extinguished. And then Clara Grace was born, a tiny girl with eyes bright as the clearing after a storm. I looked down at her and whispered, "Hello, Clara. It's just us now." And that was enough. If you've ever felt like you're about to break, remember you're not alone. Leave a comment to share your strength and your story. Together we can overcome anything. After Clara was born, life settled into a rhythm I never imagined possible. The nights were long and sleepless, filled with feeding, rocking, and soft lullabies whispered into the quiet. Each day I watched her grow, tiny fingers curling around mine, eyes wide and curious, and a smile that could light up even the darkest moments. Despite everything, I found peace in her presence. Clara became my anchor, my reason to keep moving forward even when exhaustion threatened to take over. The betrayal from Zach no longer defined me. Instead, I was defined by the strength I discovered within myself. In the first weeks of motherhood, my parents stepped in to help. They were cautious at first, unsure of how to support me through such a difficult time. But their love and presence gave me a renewed sense of belonging and comfort. My mother would softly sing to Clara, her voice trembling with emotion, while my father held her carefully as if she were made of glass. It was during this time that I received a letter from Zach. No return address, just his handwriting on cream-colored stationery. He admitted he didn't deserve to be a father, but promised that if I ever wanted Clara to know him, he would be there. I read the letter twice before carefully tucking it into the back of Clara's baby book. It wasn't an invitation, but a reminder that people make choices, and those choices shape everything. I didn't reply. We moved back into my house that winter. I painted Clara's nursery a soft yellow and hung tiny prints of flowers and clouds. Above her crib, I framed a quote, "You are loved. You are safe. You are wanted." Every word resonated with every fiber of my being. Some nights when Clara wouldn't sleep, I'd walk the hallways with her cradled against my shoulder, whispering songs I barely remembered learning. I told her stories not about Zach, but about strength, joy, and new beginnings. Stories about how she saved me without even knowing it. Gradually, I found my voice again. I began writing not just private journals, but stories about women finding themselves after pain, about mothers who rise stronger. I submitted one piece to a small online magazine and it was published. Soon, another editor reached out, then another. People wanted to hear my story. I created a little writing nook beside Clara's playmat. She'd lie on her back, kicking her legs while I typed away. Sometimes I'd read her a line just to see if she smiled, and she always did. But some days the old sadness would creep back in, the ache of loss, the loneliness. On those days, I'd open the front door, step into the sunlight and whisper, "Look what we built, baby. Just us." Clara would blink up at me, gummy and grinning, and I'd remember I hadn't just survived. I had started over. If you're watching this and struggling to find your way out of heartbreak, know this, you're not alone. Share your story below, and let's walk this path together. Months passed, and with each one I grew stronger. Not just as a mother, but as a woman reclaiming her life. The pages I wrote became a testament to resilient stories of heartbreak turned into courage, silence transformed into voice. One afternoon as Clara napped, I received a call from my editor. "Lauren, your latest piece touched so many. People are responding. They want more. You have a gift." Her words filled me with hope I hadn't dared to feel in a long time. But healing isn't a straight line. Some days the loneliness would creep back like a shadow at dusk. I'd find myself staring out the window, wondering how different life might have been if things had turned out another way. If Zach had chosen me. If he'd been the man I thought he was. Then I'd look down at Clara's sleeping face and remember I chose us. Every day, in every breath, I chose the life we are building together. My parents grew closer to Clara, becoming her steady support. My mother, once distant, now called regularly to share baby milestones and offered to babysit so I could focus on writing. My father, who had struggled to express his emotions, became a quiet presence, showing love in small, meaningful ways. I even reconnected with Rachel more deeply. Our friendship blossomed into a sisterhood forged in fire. We leaned on each other, celebrated victories, and held space for tears. She reminded me that strength wasn't about never breaking. It was about rising every time we fell. Sometimes when Clara wouldn't sleep, I sang her lullabies. I barely remembered learning songs passed down from my grandmother. I whispered stories about beginnings born from endings, about joy growing after pain. And I knew that this life with Clara, with those who truly loved me, was more than enough. If you're watching and have faced betrayal or loss, remember your story doesn't have to end in heartbreak. Sometimes it's just the beginning of a new chapter. Share your thoughts below. Your courage might be the light someone else needs. Because in the end, we are not defined by what happens to us, but by how we rise. The winter months were a time of quiet transformation. The world outside was often gray and cold, but inside my home, there was warmth and light that no storm could snuff out. Clara's laughter filled the rooms, chasing away the ghosts of the past. I found myself thinking about what freedom really meant. It wasn't just the absence of pain or betrayal. It was the power to choose to define my own happiness, to protect my family, and to honor the strength I had fought so hard to find. One evening, as I tucked Clara into her crib, I stood by the window watching the snow fall softly against the dark sky. I thought about Zach, about the man I once loved, and the choices we had both made. There was no bitterness left in me, only a quiet acceptance. Life had dealt me a painful hand, but I had learned how to play it with grace and courage. I kept writing, sharing my journey with others who were searching for hope. Each story I wrote was a bridge connecting me to strangers who felt less alone, because they saw pieces of their own struggles in my words. And in that shared humanity, I found healing. I surrounded myself with people who lifted me up, friends who celebrated every small victory, family who embraced me without judgment, and a community that reminded me daily that I was worthy of love and respect. When Clara took her first steps, I was there, cheering her on, tears streaming down my face. It wasn't just a milestone for her, It was a testament to how far I had come. I thought back to the woman who had once believed she was disposable, who had hidden pain behind smiles and silence. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone fierce, resilient, and whole. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. If you're standing at the edge of your own storm, know that the darkest nights often lead to the brightest dawns. If you believe in the power of new beginnings, please share your story in the comments below. Together we can light the way forward. And remember, your life is yours to write. With time, the past no longer haunted me. The pain of betrayal and loss had softened, replaced by a deep well of wisdom and self-respect. I learned that survival was just the beginning. Thriving was the true victory. Clara grew into a bright, curious child full of wonder and joy. Every smile, every step she took reminded me why I had fought so hard to build a new life. She was my greatest accomplishment, my constant source of hope. I also found peace in setting boundaries. No longer would I tolerate lies or half-truths. I surrounded myself with people who honored my worth and respected my choices. The toxic patterns of my past had no place in this new chapter. Writing became more than a hobby, it was my mission. I used my voice to advocate for women facing heartbreak, for mothers rebuilding their lives alone, and for anyone who had ever felt invisible. My stories reached people across the country, sparking conversations and inspiring change. Occasionally, Zach would try to reach out, but I was no longer the same woman who once clung to a fading hope. I listened with compassion, but I stood firm. My focus was on Clara, on healing, and on the future I was creating, one filled with honesty, strength, and love. Looking back, I understand now that the hardest endings can lead to the most beautiful beginnings. The journey wasn't easy, but it was mine, and that made all the difference. If you've ever felt lost, betrayed, or alone, know this: you have the power to rise. Your story isn't over yet. If my journey resonates with you, please take a moment to comment below. Share your own story of strength, and let's build a community that uplifts and empowers. Together we can turn pain into power. Thank you for walking this path with me. As I sit here now watching Clara sleep peacefully, I feel a profound sense of gratitude, not for the pain I endured, but for the strength it revealed within me. Life has a way of breaking us open so we can become whole again, stronger and more authentic than ever before. This journey has taught me that true freedom comes from owning your story, embracing your scars, and choosing yourself every single day. It's about letting go of what no longer serves you and making space for growth, love, and healing. No matter where you are in your own story, remember that you are not alone. The courage to start over, to rebuild from the ashes, is a power that resides in each of us. It may not be easy and it may not be quick, but it is always possible. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of this community. If you take anything away from what I've shared, let it be this: your worth is not defined by others, but by the love and respect you give yourself. Hold on to that truth. Protect it fiercely. And never stop believing in the beautiful life waiting for you on the other side of pain. If you're ready to begin your own journey of healing and empowerment, I invite you to join the conversation below. Share your experiences, offer support, and let's grow together. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply say, "I am ready to rise."